So yeah, again, thank you very much for spending your time with me tonight. Appreciate it. It's a glorious, it's almost a summer's evening. Appreciate the time that you're spending off farm tonight with me. So a little bit about me then, for those who don't know who I am. My name's Chris. I work as a product manager here at Breedr. And a little bit about my background. I have studied and worked within nutrition. So I thought for this finisher discussion group tonight, I put a little presentation together all about the effects of micro and macro elements, so your minerals and trace elements, and kind of just going through the importance of them. So I've put a presentation together, which I will try to go through. I'll try to, we do start off, it does tend to get a little bit science heavy. So I'll try not to lose you, which is why I kind of, I thought I would just kind of go with that first. So we'll kind of talk about the metabolic processes that we find within the animal, and then how those macro and micro elements impact on those processes. Talk about antagonisms, so where we get mineral interactions. And then where do we find macro and micro elements within our diet, or not within the diet? And then how much should we be feeding them, and how? Any questions, any interactions? Please send a message through on the chat, and I will try to respond accordingly. And then at the end of this presentation, I'll just kind of show you how the Breedr app can help with identifying whether there's any mineral imbalances or anything kind of untoward. So without further ado then, so wanted to talk a little bit about cell function. So cells, obviously, cells are what make up the entire body. And if they don't work very well, then we're going to have multiple problems. So a little bit of background then. So the wall of the cells have got what is called a sodium potassium pump. And basically what this pump does is it works by pumping sodium out of the cell and kind of pumping potassium in. And what that does is that aids the transportation of nutrients, so things like glucose and amino acids, into the cell. And then all the good products that they produce back out of the cell to circulate around the rest of the body. So really, really important pump that we need. And what it also does is it regulates effectively the water pressure within the cell. So if that is out of balance, then what you can find is the cell can swell and it can burst, which is not ideal. So really, really important function that we obviously need sodium and potassium for. But what this pump also needs is energy, and it gets the energy in the form of a compound called ATP, which again, the animal will synthesize herself. But that ATP is made up of adenosine triphosphate, which, as you can hopefully figure out, triphosphate is made up and requires 3 phosphate molecules. So again, in order for this whole function to work, what we need is sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. And what we also need is vitamin D. So vitamin D helps the animal utilize that phosphorus that they're getting from the diet. And as again, we're all aware, we get a lot of our vitamin D from sunlight energy. So for those that are intensively finishing animals indoors, is that an area that we should be looking at? What kind of UV sunlight are we getting in our sheds? Something to consider. Impact on production then, if we're not providing these minerals and our cell function is inhibited. Effectively, if the cell isn't working in any part of the body, then we're just going to get general low performance in terms of growth rates and potential illness. Moving on then, just to talk about some enzymes then. So Again, enzymes are proteins, and they accelerate biological processes. So the most, we're probably aware of digestive enzymes that we've got that are full, that our stomachs are full of, that break down the food that we eat. And an example of that is amylase. So amylase is an enzyme that breaks down starch into glucose, and then that glucose can then be pumped into the cell using that pump, and also provide a source of energy for that pump. So really, really important. And again, so this is where for finishing cattle, starch, as we are fully aware, starch is really key for getting fat cover, but we need to break down that starch into glucose. So in order for us, for the animal to store it as fat, so we need that amylase. That amylase is vitally important for that process. And also what we know is that starch, particularly maize, will bypass the rumen and be broken down predominantly by this amylase enzyme. So really, really key. These digestive enzymes then are produced in the pancreas, which secretes into the small intestine. So again, the abomasum, small intestine. So it's bypassed the rumen. That's the site of where your starch is broken down. And the pancreas has a really high protein requirement. So an animal has a protein requirement for maintenance. So just generally looking after herself without growing or without lactating or pregnancy. So general maintenance, and half of that requirement goes straight to the pancreas, because the pancreas is pumping out those enzymes which are made of protein. So the minerals involved then with enzymes, there is quite a few. So magnesium, really important for activating those enzymes. Copper is important for the development of those enzymes. Zinc, again, a vital component of enzymes. Manganese, similar to magnesium, is really important for activating them. And chloride, which is really important for making hydrochloric acid, which again is what we have in our stomach and also in the abomasum and the small intestine. And what hydrochloric acid does is it activates pepsin, and pepsin is another enzyme which is involved in breaking down proteins. So again, really important. The impact on production then is, if we're not providing these kind of minerals and we are not producing these enzymes, is we'll have poor food conversion efficiency, which again, when we're in the finishing phase of animal production, the animals tend to be a lot older and their food conversion efficiency naturally declines. So ensuring that we're feeding correctly and we're allowing the animal to produce these enzymes is probably even more important to these type of animals. And again, so poor food conversion efficiency will equal low growth rates and potential ill thrift. Moving on then to oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is when cells and tissues become damaged by what is known as free radicals. Now, free radicals are produced when the cell and the tissue metabolizes. So it's an unnecessary, I would say necessary evil, sorry. So, we can't avoid it. They are produced. But what they effectively do is, you have a normal cell that metabolizes, they end up producing these free radicals that then go away and they start to damage other cells and can effectively kill those cells. So what do we need to protect our cells against them is antioxidants. And we've probably all heard of antioxidants. And yes, so they help guard against those free radicals. And what we need for those antioxidants is selenium and vitamin E. So where we find selenium and vitamin E is really important is because what if those free radicals are destroying cells, then that's where we get things like white muscle disease, which is where those locomotor cells in the muscles are damaged. Slightly kind of less severe than white muscle disease is, you will get cell damage to the muscles, which will impact on growth rates, but that can also impact on our carcass quality and conformation. So again, still really, really important. And vitamin E, so again, a generalization is, a lot of animals are finished perhaps indoors if we're doing it intensively, so they don't tend to be on fresh grass, which is where a lot of vitamin E is found. So again, if we're indoors on, maybe it's a barley beef, particularly a barley beef system that's got a bit of straw, things like vitamin E will not be very prevalent in those feeds. So, that animal will need supplementing. And so just the last little bit then to cover is the overall metabolism. So your metabolism is effectively how all of your processes within the body work, and at what rate do they work. And they are controlled by the thyroid gland, which produces thyroid hormones. And it's these hormones that regulate that metabolic rate. So examples of particular metabolisms are gluconeogenesis, which is where the cows actually, they produce their own glucose. So through a pathway called gluconeogenesis, which again is really important, especially in finishing diets, because fat is effectively stored glucose. So we want to be driving gluconeogenesis. We also want to be driving protein synthesis as well to help with building those enzymes. And lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fat. Again, to feed fat, we will then end up storing fat. So getting these processes driving forward is really important. And that has benefits on other metabolisms, so overall growth and development, thermoregulation, nervous function, and the immune response. So, and the thyroid gland there is found in the neck. So minerals involved in the metabolism and these thyroid hormones, really key and critical, is one single, well, not one single, but one predominant mineral, and that is iodine. Iodine is required. Effectively, it's required to produce these hormones, so really, really important. But also selenium dependent enzymes are required to activate those hormones. So as we said before, enzymes are there to activate and drive processes forward. Well, these particular enzymes require selenium. So again, iodine and selenium, really important. And then just going back to gluconeogenesis, well, that requires, in order for the animal to produce her own glucose, she needs vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 converts propionic acid, which is produced after the fermentation of carbohydrates into glucose. Well, vitamin B12 is actually synthesized by the rumen microbes themselves, but in order to do that, they need cobalt. So to kind of, it's a very long-winded way of getting there, but basically we need cobalt. Cobalt in the diet will help with that glucose production. And then on top of that, as part of driving forward protein synthesis and producing particular amino acids, methionine and cysteine, they will only be produced if sulfur is available. So again, sulfur, really important with that one. Impact on production then, so again, it's going to be stunted growth. If your overall metabolism is not really functioning very well and it's very slow, then it's just going to affect pretty much everything in the entire body. So iodine also has a very big impact on reproductive failure. So you can end up with abortions or dystocia, abnormalities, calf deformities. If iodine has been restricted during the pregnancy phase, it'll also impact on fertility. So that's kind of covering all of the in-depth sciencey bits and pieces. I just wanted to talk now about antagonisms. So an antagonism is the negative impact of one mineral on the absorption of another. So what we tend to find is, even if you think you are supplying a particular mineral in adequate quantities, if you've got the presence of another mineral, then that will block the uptake of that other mineral, then it can effectively look like you're not supplying enough of it when actually you are. It's the impact of this other mineral. So examples are things like copper. So copper, like we said, important for red blood cells and enzymes. Well, the presence of molybdenum and iron can prevent the absorption of copper. Copper and zinc are also very, very similar in the way they're absorbed, so they tend to compete with each other. Magnesium, like we all know, if there's too much potassium around, then that can impact magnesium. So that's why we tend to not put potassium fertilizers on spring grass that is going to be grazed, because then you really increase the likelihood of getting grass stackers, so hypomagnesemia. Manganese, again, impacted by iron. Calcium is impacted by phosphorus. And that iodine is impacted by compounds called goitrogens, which are found in brassicas. So if we're out wintering young stock or cows or anything on brassica crops, then again, we have to be careful and make sure that they're getting enough iodine, because the goitrogens within those brassicas prevent the uptake of that iodine by the thyroid gland. Sources then, so where do we find macro and microelements? So this is just a table, a list of some really common feeds that we tend to find in our diets. And just to highlight a couple of the key ones. So, you know, that maize, silage and barley is very low in calcium. And I didn't expand on it on the previous slide, but calcium and phosphorus, the animal will try to keep a constant level of two calcium to 1 phosphorus. So if there's not enough calcium in the body, then they'll be drawing that calcium out of the bone to compensate for that. So that's where, you know, if we're drawing calcium out of our bone, then that's going to cause, you know, brittle and weaker bones, which is not what we want. Potassium and sodium. So again, remember the first slide when we talked about the sodium potassium pump on the cell walls. Again, maize, silage, barley, you know, very common finisher feeds, do not provide very high amounts of these minerals compared to other common feeds. So again, that's something that we have to be very aware about. Magnesium. Just go back. Magnesium then. So again, we know that antagonism between potassium and magnesium. Well, if we're on a barley-based diet, you know, barley straw, sorry, then the barley straw can provide quite high amounts of potassium. And if we're feeding that alongside things like maize, silage, and barley, that is not providing, you know, amazing amounts of magnesium, then again, we're kind of running the risk of having hypomag situation there. And then finally, that antagonism again with iron locking up copper. So if we're on a mixed grey silage, maize silage diet, you know, the maize is not providing very much copper, but what the grass is providing is quite a lot of iron. So again, the small amount of copper that is in the diet is probably going to be, you know, or could potentially get locked up by the high iron content in the grass. So feeding micro and macro elements then. So how much should I be feeding? Well, the answer to that question is you need to know effectively, you know, or where is the animal already getting their micro and macro elements from. So there is a checklist, you know, a kind of some procedures that you should follow. So the first one really is to make sure that the diet meets the requirements for their energy and protein. So, you know, first of all, make sure that is right. And then once you've formulated your diet, you know what your ingredients are, then you should analyze those ingredients, analyze them for their mineral content, and then you can gauge what mineral supply you're getting from your diet. So that includes silages, that also includes fresh grass, and you know, also your concentrates. So from there, you can start to analyze other sources, and other sources will be things like water. So really important if you're on, you know, borehole water, for example, that could potentially have heavy metals in there or a lot of iron, you know, compared to, you know, what's the word? No, I was going to say normal water. Mine's gone blank. Off the grid water, you know what I mean. And mains water, that's the one. I don't know why that word eluded me. So mains water versus borehole water, and also the soil. So again, if you're analyzing your fresh grass, then what you will find is the minerals that are or are not in your grass would tend to be there or not be there in your soil. So and getting the soil right first is probably the most important, because, you know, all your health, fertility, nutrition from your soil will transcend up into your grass, into your forages, and then into your cows. So, you know, soil really, you know, really important actually for overall animal nutrition and health. So, and then the bedding. So, you know, if they're on straw, if they're on anything else that they can potentially eat, you know, is worth testing. Fertilizer again as part of your nutrient management plan with your soil and your crops. Understanding those antagonisms then, so just having an understanding and awareness of what they are and how they interact is really important. And then you can also evaluate, you know, if you think that you have a problem or you have it on farm, then you can take blood tests, you know, get the vet involved and actually analyze some animals and see what is circulating or not circulating in the blood. So methods of supplementation then, just to finish off, a number of different ways. So there's a powdered product, which, you know, may or may not be limited to mixer wagons. The fact that it comes as a really dry powder, you need a certain element of moisture within the diet to prevent it from just filtering out and sitting on the concrete floor at the bottom, and the cows don't eat any. Free access licks and buckets, relatively expensive, I always found, but they are practical. You know, you buy them, just whip the lid off and chuck them out nice and easy. The problem with that is if you're in an outdoor system, they can attract badgers. So if you're in a TB sensitive zone, you know, that might be an issue unless you can put them on a stand. And I always found on farm that they're really difficult to regulate the intake. You don't know, you know, with the relatively high levels of salt and sugar, you can get greedy cows. You can also, you know, some cows can suffer from bullying. So some will get a lot, some might not get any at all. You have no idea. There's water systems, so you can mineralize the water. Again, that can impact palatability. I know I've fed the magnesium flakes, you know, put them in the water, which is good. It does the job, but, you know, the cows do kind of sometimes turn their nose up to it. And again, yes, okay, you're guaranteed they're going to consume water within the duration of the day, but you don't know that level of intake. Are they consistently, just sipping every day, or are they having, great big gulpfuls? And if they're having great big gulpfuls, then again, they're getting a large intake of those minerals in one hit, which, is not ideal. So, and then there's boluses, drenches, injections. Again, convenience. If you're not feeding a TMR or some sort of diet, or you've got cows out to grazing, they can tend to cover you for up to 6 months. So relatively convenient. And that was kind of it, really. So that was just a bit of a relatively in-depth. I hope it wasn't too techy. It didn't lose you too much. But I also just wanted to, very conscious of time. So literally just a couple minutes just to finish off. I just wanted to show you then on the Breedr app. So effectively what we're talking about here in terms of micro and macro minerals is, although you think that your diet might be properly formulated and it looks great and everything's going really well, you might still be incurring performance issues that you just don't quite understand. You don't know what's going on. And on the Breedr app, we can help you identify that. So if you are so with your groups, then for example, I've got my fat stock group here that I have set my target weight and my target date. And then if I am regularly weighing my animals, so if I click on one animal, then I can see that I've got my target date, my target weight, and I can see along that blue line, that's my target line. How below or above are they, and when are they predicted to achieve my targets? So again, even though my diet in terms of energy and protein and everything else should be achieving the target, and if I'm not, then this kind of graph can highlight that, and it can show you particular areas that you may be lacking. So this particular animal didn't show particularly good growth rates, only 0.61 from the point of birth to August, where it was first weighed. So okay, fine, I know that was a young animal, and it would have been on the cow, so it might be in a cow issue, but again, that's an area that I can look at and maybe identify some problems. I might have a mineral imbalance out at grass that I need to rectify. So I can analyze my animals on an individual basis, but I can also, if I go to my reports and I go on my farm performance report, I can now filter by the group. So if I select up here, filter by my 2020 fat stock, then what I can do is I can look at this graph here, which is, again, it's that that average daily live weight gain by that group by age. So again, this is 0 to 4 weeks, so it's done in four week blocks, or 1 month blocks, and I can see that I'm getting, my growth rate is not great from birth, but then even at this period, kind of from 10 months to 12, 13, I'm experiencing another dip here. So what is going on here? And so this is obviously a really good graph if I am breeding my own stock. But then if I scroll down here, this is days on farm. So this is exactly the same principle, exactly the same thing, but this is based on the day that that animal came onto farm. So if you are a designated finisher unit, then this is the graph that you can use. And well, that kind of brings me to time, really. So only a couple minutes past past. No questions that have come up, last chance now if there's any kind of burning questions. If not, then please feel free to get in contact. Anything you want to know about minerals, you can give me a shout, chris.freeman@breedr.co. And likewise, like I said at the beginning, I'm part of the product team, so always wanting to hear your thoughts and opinions and any improvements that you'd want, or any new features, then please do let us know. Please do get in contact, and we'll continue to try and keep building on what we've got. So yeah, again, thank you very much for your time. I know it's been a really nice evening, and a lot of people are probably still out working, but yeah, thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.